welcome back to the fourth edition of our How to Ace interview. So we're on How to Ace interview part 4. So today we're going to be taking a deep dive into some of the types of interviews that we've already mentioned before. So the first on the list is behavioral interviews. Behavioral interviews. These are a very popular interview style. Is used by employees, to test, to evaluate a candidate's past behavior. They want to test your past behavior to be able to predict your future behavior. So it helps employers to evaluate your skills, your experience, how you work within a team, your problem-solving skill, your adaptability, and how you'll be able to survive or fit into the organization. So behavioral is about studying of past patterns to predict how you're likely going to behave in the future. So it's all about experience. So most of these questions come in this format. Tell me a time that you've worked within a team, or tell me a time that you have communicated value. So tell me a time. What are they trying to tell you? Because they believe that the best way to predict your future behavior is by understanding what you've done in the past. It's important for you to tell your story in a way that gives you that right judgment. So instead of employers asking hypothetical questions, just random questions, they focus on actual experience. They focus on the behavior, what you're bringing to the table, so that they can gauge or judge your performance. So an example of questions will be: describe or tell me a time where you faced challenges, or where you've led a team, or where you've solved problems. So these questions help to reveal, your thinking under pressure, your ability to adapt, your ability to tell your story with confidence and clarity. They're trying to judge your behavior in order to predict your future behavior. So you must be intentional about this. So instead of employers asking you, are you good in a team? They ask you, tell me about a time that you've worked in a team. You can see the difference. So you're able to tell your story. You're able to say evidence and not some rehearsed words. You're able to show proof. So tell me, because they want to see the evidence. They don't want to see claims. They want to see evidence. So this approach helps you to be able to tell your story in a way that they're able to judge whether you be a good fit or not. So it's still about cultural fit. They're trying to determine if you be a good fit for the organization. So in order for you to be able to prepare for this type of interview, these are not the type of interview that you will go into without actually preparing, without knowing what to say. So it's always good to already have prepared for your scenarios. And I tell people, just make sure you have like 3 to 4 scenarios that when they tap and wake you up in the middle of the night, you're able to say the scenario. So form your scenarios around leadership, teamwork, pressure, problem solving, those 4 areas. Make sure you have good 3 to 4 scenarios that you've already prepared, that if they ask you anything around, this 4, you're able to answer confidently. And even when they don't ask you about this 4, you're still able to adapt. Remember, the word adaptability is very important, that you don't panic. You don't become unnecessarily nervous during interviews because they haven't asked you questions that you thought they were going to ask you. Adaptability is very important. So being able to tweak what you already prepared to fit into what they're asking you, adaptability. And if you can't do that on the spot, just say exactly the same thing you've asked. A lot of times they're not testing what you're saying, they're testing your confidence and ability to speak articulately. So make sure that you prepare. Preparation is very important. Let's look at one example and use the STAR approach to answer it. So tell me a time you faced a challenge. And remember, this could be tell me a time you led a team. And this could also be tell me a time that you solved the problem. So you want to start, remember the STAR approach? So in one of our system improvement projects, there was a disagreement between system users and system provider because one of the functionality didn't work. That's the situation. You want to talk about the task now. As the business improvement specialist, I was asked to lead the conversation. My responsibility was to resolve the conflict, establish facts, and ensure that we move forward without damaging stakeholder relationships. So that was your task. And then you're going to talk about the action. What did I do? So what I did was to organize a structured workshop with both parties. I also demonstrated our understanding of the process is crucial to how we work. I separated emotion from evidence by documenting findings objectively. I also reframed discussion from who is right to what outcome and what do we need now. So that was the action. Those are all the things that you did. Okay? And then you're going to go to result. So what was the stakeholders agreed on a configuration change with defined timelines. And we're able to reduce downtime by 20%. So the next one I want to talk about is technical interview. So technical interviews. Remember, interviews are in stages. So you've done your phone screening, you've done your face-to-face. Sometimes the first stage can be your behavioral, and the second stage can be technical interview. But most times, technical interview comes alongside with behavioral or after behavioral, as after the second stage. So what is technical interview? Technical interview is assessing the technicalities of your role, of your job. It's usually specific to the type of role that you're doing, especially if you're in engineering, if you're in IT, other services. Technicalities would be around policies, change management, and all that. But for IT specifically, it's going to be around the technicality of their role in terms of being able to code, being able to demonstrate system knowledge and all that. For other non-technical roles, just going to be being able to demonstrate that you understand your job, your role in terms of policies and changes, and that happens within your role. So what is technical interview assessing? Is assessing your problem solving ability, is also looking at your technical knowledge. For example, if you're in customer service, they want to know about some of your skills that are very important to customer service, like communication, listening skills. They want to test your ability to solve problems, ability to build relationships. Those are the technicalities of your role, really, because those skills are very important to what you do. So it's all about testing your problem solving ability, your technical knowledge, if you're in the technical field, your coding skills, your system thinking, your communication skills. So it's not just about getting the right answer. It's about they want to know how you think. They want to know how you get to the answer, how you get to that result. So a lot of times they give you scenarios, maybe true life story, or they give you like a system problem. They want you to fix it. They want you to tell us what is wrong. They want to know the logic, how you arrived at the conclusion. So a lot of times they're testing how efficient you are. They're also testing critical thinking, critical ability. So a lot of organizations actually uses this to get rid of people, really, to get rid of candidates. Because if you can't demonstrate critical thinking, you may not be able to, pass this stage. So you've done your first, second stage. The third stage is usually very critical and very strict. So you must also be intentional about how you answer technical questions. So they want to know about the tools that you've used before, you know, they want to know about the related project that you've done in the past that demonstrates this type of knowledge, the challenges you face, the performance improvements, capabilities that you've shown before, the lessons learned. So that's why they ask you questions like, what would you do differently in a particular situation? Because they want you to tell us about lessons learned. For example, as an analyst, I want to tell you, maybe you've gathered, maybe for example, missed requirements. That's very common. So what will you do differently to avoid missed requirements? And you must know the technicalities about what requirements are, what are missed requirements, what causes missed requirements, so as to be able to answer why you would avoid a missed requirements or maybe a scope creep or something. Yeah. So it's all about clarifying the problem, really. If they give you like a scenario, clarify the problem. What are the constraints? What are the expected input or output? So don't just jump into conclusions. When they ask this type of questions, you want to be you want to be intentional to clarify, know what they're asking you. Don't just jump to the conclusion like that. So clarify the problem and plan in terms of this is what you're going to do first, and you go to the next stage. So I remember a time that I was given a scenario-based question like this so they gave me a problem to solve and they wanted me to solve the problem. So what I did was to use the PDCA art for those that are in project management: plan, do, act, check. That was the approach I used. So I structured my answer using plan, using do, did what you do at the do stage, what you do at the act stage, and what you do last. So they want to know. So you must have some examples. You must be able to have like some formulas that you're going to apply to answer this type of question. So technical interviews are about, they want to test your technical understanding, architectural knowledge, problem solving. I also want to test your decision making skills and your communication skills. So you must be able to explain clearly when they ask you this type of questions. An example could be, walk me through your most complex project. So what was your complex project? Walk me through it. So you want to talk about what you did beyond the situation star and all that we've talked about. You want to go into details, the tools you use, what you saw, what was challenging, why did you classify it as a complex project. So this is about storytelling and at the same time being technical about it. For example, if you're in customer service, it was a complex situation because the customer was satisfied. So what did you do? Then you use the last approach. Listen. I listened to the customer. Action. This is what I did. You solved the problem. This is what I did to solve the problem. And T, you thank the customer. So there are some of these things that if you're going for this type of interviews, you just have to know them. Okay. So another example could be, how did you improve performance? So, beyond using the STAR technique, you see what I'm saying? You must know how to improve performance in your role. So you want to say what you did, and the tools that you use to do it. So that's very key. They're testing the depth of your knowledge. They're also testing ownership. Not that you pass the buck or somebody else solve the problem for you. You get what I mean? So they're looking for real contribution. So you must be intentional about how you answer these questions. And I tell you, you can still use the STAR approach. Just make sure that you put tools and methodologies in between when you're speaking about your actions. There are some tips for technical interviews. Always break your answers into parts. So you've talked about, for example, the situation. When you're talking about your action, and most importantly, you must talk about the tools and methodologies, and also use real examples. Instead of saying catching improves performance, you want to say, in my previous project, we reduced API response time by 40% by implementing Redis catching. So in my previous project, customer satisfaction score was improved by 40% due to what you did. So you want to be intentional to call out those facts and also explain trade-offs. If you're going for senior leadership role, you want to be talking about trade-offs, how microservices improved scalability because you increased operational efficiency. Example, where you've improved scalability because of increasing complexity. They want to see trade-offs where you've improved performance because you improved access to these. They want to see trade-offs. So when you're going to a senior leadership interview, you want to be talking about trade-offs, and you want to be talking about, also you want to think aloud. So if they're giving you a technical question, think out loud, explain your thought process. But sometimes silence can make interviewers to be unsure about what you're doing. So you want to think out loud, ask questions if you need to. Some of the mistakes that you should not make at this stage is to speak too generally. Like I said, is a type of interview that requires you to bring tools and methodologies, bring policies, to substantiate what you're saying with theories, with proven tools and methodologies or policies, something that's proven. Okay. So don't speak too generally, and don't make sure that you're explaining the tools and methodologies clearly. They're looking for real evidence and real how you've demonstrated real value. Avoid not knowing the project very clearly and deeply. So if they ask you about your most complex project, don't go and pick a project that you don't have complete knowledge of, because if they ask you further questions, you're able to articulate your thoughts, provide answers, you lose clarity and it does not demonstrate excellence. So another type of interview that I want to talk about is the group interview. This is a type of interview that a lot of people don't like it, but it's actually not bad. The group interview is when multiple candidates are assessed at the same time. I can tell you that this type of interview can be very stressful. If you know what to do, it's not that bad. So employers are testing your communication skills. Most importantly, they're testing your leadership skills. They're testing how you're able to communicate without actually showing that you're a leader. Testing your listening skills. They're testing how you behave under pressure. So group interview is usually a type of interview where they give you like a scenario for all of you to solve the problem. So they usually give you an example like this. You work for a retail company. Over the past 3 months, customer complaints have increased by 30%. Staff morale is low. Sales have dropped by 15%. Online reviews mention slow service and unhelpful staff. Senior management has given you 20 minutes. Senior management has given your team 20 minutes to come up with a plan to improve the situation. So they will now give you a list of questions. Identify the main problems. Agree on the top 3 priorities. Suggest practical solutions. Choose one person to present your final plan in 3 minutes. So they give you a scenario like that. In most cases, the one that I've been to a couple. The first one, it was printed. So they gave each of us a copy, and they sat in the corner. How many people sat? About 2 or 3. I can't remember now. 2 or 3 people sat in the room with us, and they were watching us. So we sat around the round table, and we started talking. So these are type of interviews that you need to know the rules, so that you need to know the rules. You need to know what they're testing for, so that you can try. It's not about whose voice is the loudest, because some people are just unnecessarily, agitated and they want to be in control. It's not about that. It's about who takes initiatives. It's about who structures the discussion. It's about who listens and also build on the ideas of others, or build on ideas. It's about who keeps time. It's about who supports others. So you want to volunteer to either lead, okay, or volunteer to prepare or to present, or you want to volunteer to be the timekeeper. Just make sure you're doing something. Make sure you're not sitting back and waiting for others to do it. So make sure that you volunteer. Even if you volunteer to be the timekeeper, somebody else can say, yeah, I also want to be. It could be that multiple people volunteer to be timekeepers and you can only have one timekeeper. Yeah, fine. At least you volunteered. You're not just sitting back and doing nothing. You can also volunteer to take notes. Okay, I'll take the notes. Okay, I'll present. So make sure you volunteer, because it's about who takes initiatives. It's about what you're doing, really. Ensuring that you're not sitting back doing nothing. Ensuring that you're not passing the buck to others. Group interview is about collaborative leadership. How you can work with others to achieve results. So it's not about whose voice is the loudest. It's not about dominating. is about working with other people, relationship building. It's about showing you can contribute to ideas. It's about showing you respect the ideas of others, assessing communication skill, teamwork, leadership potential, confidence, respect for others, problem solving. It's about participation, what you're bringing really. It's about logic, they're assessing logic, you're assessing collaboration, they're assessing influence. So you may be given a business problem, a data review, and you're given limited time to agree on solution and present it. So the one that says how you structure your answer, even being conscious of time. That's why it's always good to volunteer for timekeeping, because somebody then is making sure that you're within the time constraint that you've been given. Also, decision making. Somebody is able to say, okay, I'm gonna be the leader, and somebody is saying, okay, I'm gonna be the person to present. Somebody is saying, I'm gonna be the team coordination, make sure that everybody's talking. And if you volunteer to be the team coordinator, if anybody is quiet, you want to be intentional to say, hey, Jakes, I've not heard your voice. Do you have anything to say? That shows that you're also looking hard for others. That shows leadership. That shows, strong values. So being aware of what to do in group interviews is very good, because if you volunteer to be a team coordinator, you already know some things that you must say. If you volunteer to be a timekeeper, you already know that you must actually be making sure that they're keeping to time. If you volunteer to take notes, you must make sure that your notes is well structured and readable. So these are the things that people already know before they go to group interviews, and they just go there and pick one of these roles and they begin to act. It's about problem solving. So being able to structure the discussion. Oh, shall we divide this into three key areas? That shows leadership naturally. Or when somebody make a comment, you say, oh yeah, I agree with Jax, because since, for example, if Sarah had said something, you want to say, before you contribute, you're saying, oh, I agree with what Sarah said. I also like to add. So you're building on what others have said. You're not throwing away the ideas of others. So also managing time. Oh, we have 3 minutes left. Shall we summarize? We have 2 minutes left. Shall we summarize? That's a very impressive behavior. So that's all that they are looking for in group interview. They're not even looking at the solution that you're going to bring. They're just assessing your behavior. So, and also, if anybody's not speaking, one of you must be able to call them out, or you must be the one to call them out to say, oh, does anyone else want to add something? No, Jakes, I noticed you've been quiet. Do you want to say something? It shows that you're also looking out for others. Or maybe you may not want to call out their names, but if they are quiet or true, you may want to give them room to talk, because that's how it works in real life. You want to show that you're looking out for others. So those are some of the tips that I think is good for you to know. But what are some of the mistakes that people can make during an interview if you're not aware of all these things? People may want to be loud. They may want to think that the loudest is what they're looking for. No. So they don't talk over others, and don't be so quiet. I said don't even be quiet. Don't be quiet. Quietness is not a strength in this case. And don't be aggressive. Sometimes you may not agree to what people have said. It's not the end of the world. Don't be aggressive. Just express yourself in a way that is calm, and don't dismiss other people's ideas, because sometimes it's scenario based. Some people may not be knowledgeable about the scenario, and because they just want to contribute, they're going off the point. And you may want to be tempted, because you know the answer, to say, oh, that's not right. No, don't dismiss other people's ideas, and don't ignore instructions. A lot of times they deliberately put some instructions in there to see if any of you is going to notice it. So they put a phrase, they put a clause, just to be sure that you're going to be able to say it. And sometimes people don't get to say it, and sometimes you may say it. So be careful to make sure that you're reading instructions. They may have already sent instructions that you don't need to present in a particular format. So if you don't see the instruction, you may be presenting the format that is not allowed. So it's always good to read instructions. Don't ignore instructions, and just know that in a group interview, you're not competing against one another. No, you're not. So trying to outshine others does not make you a better candidate or suitable candidate for the job. No, they're not. They're not testing competition. They're assessing your individual skills and how well you work with others. They're testing your ability to work within a team. That's teamwork. They're testing teamwork. They're testing leadership. They're also testing your values, um, your calm demeanor, your ability to support one another, your ability to not want to outshine others. So those are what they're looking for in group interviews. So it'll be key for you to know that. So those are what they're looking for in group interview. Let's talk about case interview. Case interview. So case interview is a problem solving interview where a business scenario and they ask you to analyze it and recommend a solution. It's similar to some of the ones we've been saying, but this is very common if you're into consulting, if you're into strategy, if you're looking for strategic roles, if you're into product roles, if the company is a tech company, and if it's graduate schemes. If you have, it's common to consulting, strategic roles, product roles, tech companies, and graduate schemes. So if you're like a business analyst, project manager, you're like a finance analyst and all that, you're likely going to do a case interview. So a case interview is where you're given a scenario. And I think most companies these days they do case interviews. So because a lot of companies are looking for those that are actually going to be able to demonstrate value. A lot of companies are looking for problem solvers. So what they do mostly is to tell their own to turn their own problems into story. They're recruiting you into maybe a product role. So what are the challenges? What are they trying to solve? They turn that into a story and they ask you to analyze and solve it. They're trying to test structured thinking. They're trying to test how analytical you are. They're trying to test your commercial awareness as well, your communication skills, your confidence under pressure. They're trying to test your decision making skills. So it's they care more about how you think than the perfect answer because it's a business problem. You may not even be the only one to solve it eventually. So they're not looking for the solution. They're looking for your thinking process, how you think. And I think most importantly, they're also looking for commercial awareness. How aware are you about what is going on, industry trends and all that? So to approach a case interview is to not jump to the conclusion. So they're giving you the scenario. So the one that I attended last, it was a case scenario interview. So they did give me a real business problem in terms of what they want to solve, and they were in the room with me to say, okay, go through the questions and let us know if you need anything from us. What they're trying to say is like they want you to read and they want you to clarify the objective. Read the scenario and clarify the objective, clarify exactly what they want you to do. So don't just conclude because they've given you a snapshot of the story. They probably have more detailed story to tell you. So by asking questions will allow them to be able to tell you more about it. So ask questions. What is the main goal? What does success look like? What are we trying to achieve? What is the time frame? Just ask questions to clarify what the objective is. So are we talking about increasing profit? Are we talking about increasing revenue? Are we talking about increasing sales? Are we talking about fixing this problem? Just clarify what you think it might be. And then structure the problem. Find out within the scenario what is the problem. It's a business problem that they're giving you. So that means there's a problem. So first identify the problem. Identify the problem, break the problem into parts. After you've identified the problem, then you can now begin to think of, okay, what are the root causes? I begin to identify the root cause. If it's given within the problem statement, yes, fine. If not, think outside of the box. Think about policies, think about, and that's your commercial awareness, it's needed. Think about formulas that common structures like revenue and cost for those in finance, market competition, those economic terms like market competition, SWOT analysis. Think about all these things and use them to structure your approach. Analyze the data. So were you given any data? If you're not given any data, that's a good way to ask questions. So in most cases they will give you the data. So analyze the data. What you're looking for in the data is not something that complex. You're just looking for trends. It may enable you to also identify the root causes. It may mean that you have to interpret numbers. For example, if it's finance related, it may mean that you have to interpret numbers because we have sales is increasing, because sales is reducing, because maybe there's a problem with customer service, there's a problem with your digital capability. You're able to link them together to say, okay, this is this. Because I remember what we said about trade-off. This is happening because this has happened, or this is reducing because they're not paying attention to this. So you're able to think logically, okay? And don't just assume. Explain how you arrive at that conclusion. Explain your answer. So it's all about, being able to have structured formats to be able to structure the problem and develop insights. It's not that complicated. In fact, this is the type of interview that I love most. I love this type of interview. You just need to be able to know how to explain yourself. And before you go in, you must have like what I call formulas. Any scenarios that comes your way, you just know the right formula to apply. You must be somebody that loves to read. You must be somebody that knows methodology, somebody that knows formats. Like I talk about the PDCA, Deming cycle, SWOT analysis. You must know about market competition. You must know about all those different things that you can use to bring your points to life. So that's one. So you must also give a clear recommendation. So this is the answer you've arrived at because XYZ. Okay? Because XYZ. So you must support your answers with evidence and reasons. You must also be able to identify the risk, challenges, and you must be able to see how you can also mitigate the risk. So it's all about, like I said, it's similar to technical interview because you have to understand the technicality of your role. You have to be able to know the methodologies that you use within your role to be able to interpret and answer this type of questions. And if then it's always good to mention next steps. So I recommend that during supplier costs and improving operational efficiency, as rising costs appear to be the primary driver of declining profit, to make recommendations. Common case types will be around profit decline, market entry, pricing strategy, product launch, cost reduction, growth strategy, technology transformation. Another key thing to also make sure you always know is about researching about competitors, because for this type of case interviews, you want to bring the data about about their competitors in. So if you're talking about market entry, you want to be able to talk about what their competitors are doing, their growth margin, their profit percentage. So reading wide if you're going for is necessary if you're going for this type of interview. So some of the common mistakes to jump straight into answering the question. No, you have to pause and think. What are they trying to understand? What is the problem? What are they trying to say? And another problem is when there's no structure. Like I said, you must be able to know how to structure your answer. For example, if you're going to use SWOT analysis, you must understand what SWOT analysis is, your strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And if you're presenting if they give you like what's it called, whiteboard, you draw it and you write the strength. You must be able to have a structured way to answer problems, to answer this type of questions, and you must try as much as possible to preamble. to not ramble. It's very easy to ramble. But once you go in with a structured format and you have some of those different, tools or methodologies or things that you can use to present, don't ignore asking questions. Ask questions. Don't say, oh, they've given me everything, and they will never give you everything you need. They're expecting you to ask questions and avoid not giving recommendation, because that's why they've invited you to come and help them solve their business problems. So you must give recommendation and how to stand that race is stay calm, be structured, think out loud, use the data they've given you wisely, and be decisive. Be decisive. Sometimes it's not about the answer, really. It's about steps you've taken to arrive at the end. The answer may not be right. And for this type of interview, there's really no right or wrong answer. It's just about how you're able to think and how you're able to structure your answers. And the last one I'm going to be talking about is assessment centers. Assessment centers. Assessment centers is a structured recruitment process where multiple candidates are assessed with multiple different exercises during the in one day or over several stages. So it's commonly used for graduate schemes, corporate roles. It's used for leadership programs. It's used for public sector jobs and large organizations, consulting firms, banks, mostly leadership roles, mid-level executive roles. So most junior roles may not require you to, but if it's a graduate scheme, yeah, definitely. So what are they assessing really? They are assessing your communication skills, teamwork. So imagine all the 4 stages is done in one day. You do your screening, you do your group work, group interview, you do your panel interview. So you're going from one stage to another, going from one room to another. Okay. So you do your culture fit. You have like a time to chat with the directors one-on-one, over lunch, over coffee. So you have all of this packed into one, and they're looking for leadership skills. You're testing your problem solving, your commercial awareness, your being able to interact with others, being able to behave under pressure, teamwork, communication, and how much of leadership values you have really. So they give you like a business case for group exercise, business case, problem to solve, ranking and prioritization work. They want to test your collaboration and how you think. So critical thinking is very important, and also listening skills. So it's all about all that we've said, all the different types of interview, just packaged into one. And because it's packaged into one, it can be very daunting, very, very stressful. It can be very, very brain draining. So you want to prepare so that you're not under pressure. You want to prepare. So they also give you like case study presentation where you present your approach, you present your recommendation, and sometimes your presentation may even be on the screen. So it means that you know how to prepare PowerPoint slides, you know how to type accurately. I've been to an interview before where they were actually beside me and they were watching me type. All those, you must have mastered all those skills. How to type. There are so many typing software out there that you can use to learn how to type. Over time, you just become proficient at typing fast. So they give you that scenario, and ask you to present. They want to test your presentation skills. How you're able to articulate and present your word with clarity. Okay, so they're testing confidence. They're testing structure, really. So also they give you role play exercise where they may say, oh, okay, you're handling an unhappy client, or you're negotiating a supplier, or you're managing a team conflict. So how would you behave? They're testing your behavior. So they want to assess your emotional intelligence. They want to assess your persuasion, your professionalism. Okay. And also psychometric tests, those numerical reasoning, verbal reasoning, logical reasoning. So They do all that as situational judgments. You do all that. They usually some people will even start with that. Do all those psychometric tests where they are asking you repeatedly just to show patterns, verbal reasoning and all that. So you do all that. Then you also do your individual interview, one-to-one interview. That's like competency-based questions, the behavioral one that we said. Tell me a time you've done this, tell me a time you've done that. Or so make sure that for that type of interview, you're using your STAR approach. So how do you survive? How do you survive? How do you survive? Like, it's just a combination of all that we've said. If you're in a group interview, if you're in a group activity, make sure you speak, make sure you're not the quiet one, and make sure you're not dominating, make sure you're not rude, make sure you're speaking with clarity, make sure you respect the ideas of others, make sure you show structure, make sure you're not the last to talk, make sure you're one of the first few people that talked, that said something. Make sure that you volunteer to do something, volunteer to lead, to do the timekeeper, to structure. It could even be volunteering at the end to clean up, to pack up the things that you used. You never know what they're testing for. So, and also use names, use names. I agree with, if somebody has said something, I agree with you, James. I agree with you, Muriel. Use names of people. Don't just ignore people's names, because one of the things that you may first need to do is to introduce yourself. My name is this, my name is that. So make sure you pay attention to people's name. And I tell you, even when you go for interviews, it's always good to call your interviewer's name. Or they say, oh, my name is John. Nice to meet you, John. So memorize people's names. It brings out that human part of you. So use names, it shows collaborations as well. And also be time conscious. So we have 5 minutes left. Or shall we summarize? That's very impressive. And also stay positive. Stay positive. Even though you may be tired and frustrated, and you may think that you're not really contributing, don't be nervous about it. Don't panic, because they're observing you. So stay positive. Even if it's to smile, even if it's to repeat what somebody has said, just stay positive. Common mistakes would be to try to dominate others, try to outshine others aggressively. That's very common. And you see people's aggressiveness coming out. So stay completely silent is dangerous in this type of interview. Never stay silent in this type of interview. Make sure you're speaking, make sure you're communicating. Even if you think what you're saying does not make sense, still talk. And don't interrupt others. Don't ignore the quiet ones. That's why you don't want to be the quiet person, because somebody's going to, in group interviews, somebody's going to pick on you to say, oh, hey, Lola, I've not heard you speak today. So what do you think? It's good for them, but not good for you. Just make sure that you balance your confidence. There are times that deep inside of you, you don't feel confident, but make sure that on the outside, your confidence is at 100%. Professional presence. Make sure you bring that your professionalism. Don't get casual. Don't get, because it's easy to, because you're in a group, it's easy to just get casual. No, still stay professional. Still stay professional. So assessment center is good. At least you get to do all of everything in one day. Unlike where you may have to do the 4 stages over a month, and that can be over 3 weeks, over a month, even in some cases more than that. So it's a good way of just get everything done in one day and you forget about it. But it has also to be structured and intentional, and just know that today I'm gonna give everything I have, because this job is mine. So yeah. All right. So thank you for watching. I'll see you next Friday.